Joshua was born on a rainy September night in a public hospital in a small town, surrounded by silence and absence. There was no father waiting outside with flowers, no mother to welcome him with teary eyes. The cry that filled the room was his alone, and maybe that's why it took a while to come. Upon realizing his physical disability, a severe malformation in his left leg and total lack of mobility in his hip, his parents, too young and too frightened, chose abandonment. They left him there as if he were a mistake they could simply walk away from. The following years were spent between cribs and the cold walls of a modest orphanage, where affection was a rare commodity and smiles came more from the faith of the caretakers than from any certainty of a future. Joshua grew up among looks of pity and whispered comments, but also among whispered prayers at the foot of the bed and small silent victories, like the first time he managed to balance using his improvised prosthesis. Faith, for him, was not taught, it was discovered. Discovered in the silence, in the absence, in the depths of a soul no one else entered. He had a strange and beautiful way of seeing the world. While other children complained about food or fought over worn-out toys, Joshua looked out the window and gave thanks for the sky, even when it was gray. Gratitude was his secret language, his refuge, his resistance. He had no family, but he gave thanks for the nuns who taught him to read. He didn't have full health, but he gave thanks for the mornings when he could get out of bed on his own. He was ridiculed by classmates for walking slowly, but he gave thanks for being able to walk at all. And when they mocked his faith, "God still hasn't healed you, huh?" he would respond with a small smile and a phrase he always repeated, "Not yet, but he always hears me." Inside, it hurt sometimes. God's silence, the weight of the days, the social exclusion. But Joshua had something within him that others didn't. Understand, a flame that remained lit, even in the wind of pain. And that's what kept him going, every day. Even when no one seemed to notice he existed. In his teenage years, Joshua had become known around town as the boy from the orphanage who's always smiling. He worked part-time helping out in the school library, and the rest of the time, he repaired things at Mr. Nicanor's workshop, a rough but fair man who had seen in Joshua a rare kind of honesty. With nimble hands, despite his physical limitations, he dismantled old radios, fixed rusty bicycles, and repaired noisy fans from the neighboring houses. He now lived alone in a small room behind the workshop with peeling walls and a single bed next to the window. The place was modest, but to him it felt like peace. At night he would sit at the foot of the bed with a blue-covered notebook and write prayers, not requests, but thank yous. Simple things. Thank you for the leftover beans from yesterday. Thank you, it didn't rain while I walked with the broken crutch. Thank you for still believing. It was as if he were writing letters to a God who might never reply, but whom he was certain was reading. That calm conviction, which no one could quite grasp, was his invisible fortress. But not every fortress stands without cracks. One winter day, Joshua arrived at the workshop and found the others laughing loudly. One of them was holding his prayer notebook. "Look at this, guys. The cripple writes little letters to God." He mocked, reading aloud one of Joshua's most personal entries. The group's laughter cut like a knife. Joshua tried to smile, as he always did, but his eyes could no longer follow suit. He took the notebook with trembling hands and walked away without a word. That night, he didn't write. For the first time in years, he didn't feel strong enough to give thanks. He lay down without praying, facing the wall, trying to silence the question echoing inside him. Was I a fool all this time? The silence of the night seemed to mock him too, as if even God had looked away. But even in that mute pain, something inside Joshua had not fully broken. It was like a root buried too deep to be pulled out. Faith still pulsed, a tired faith, but a living one. The next morning, Joshua woke up with puffy eyes and a numb heart, but he forced himself to get up. The physical pain was routine. His prosthesis was worn out and often hurt his skin, but that day, the wound was different. It was shame. He hesitated before leaving the room, staring into the cracked mirror on the wall. "I still believe," he whispered, almost as a challenge to himself. Routine pulled him back in, as always. Buckets to fill, tools to organize, parts to sand. Nicanor, the owner of the workshop, noticed his silence and, being a man of few words, simply left a piece of bread with butter and a cup of coffee on the workbench. A silent gesture of care. Joshua gave him a nod and a look of sincere gratitude, the kind that says more than any sentence ever could. That afternoon, amid the noise of hammers and car horns from the street, he went back to writing. "Thank you for the people who care in silence. Thank you for the bread. Thank you because I'm still here." Was that little? Maybe to some. But to him it was a daily miracle. And in that act of returning to gratitude, even while wounded, he reaffirmed something no one else could see. His soul was still whole. That same day, at dusk, while cleaning the floor of the workshop, Joshua felt a sudden dizziness and leaned against one of the shelves. The world spun slowly, as if time itself wanted to tell him something. He sat down right there on the floor, gasping, his back resting against the wall. Outside, the moon had already appeared shyly, and the sky had that deep blue that comes just before the first stars. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to breathe deeply, but the exhaustion felt rooted. He felt like a field plowed too many times, soil too dry to bear fruit. Then, somewhere between exhaustion and peace, sleep overcame him. But it wasn't ordinary sleep. Joshua dreamed of a flower-filled field he had never seen before. At the center, a man dressed in white approached him. His eyes were the kindest he had ever seen, and his voice was soft, echoing from within. "You were never unnoticed. Every tear of yours was gathered, every prayer heard. Your time has come, Joshua." Then the man touched his leg, gently like a breeze. Joshua cried in the dream, and even as he slept, his tears soaked the floor. He woke up with a damp face and a strange warmth in his chest. It was still night. The workshop was engulfed in silence, except for the soft tinkling of something outside. Perhaps the wind nudging a forgotten piece of metal. Joshua looked around, confused. He stood up on impulse, and in a moment of shock, realized he had done so without using his hands, without leaning on shelves, without searching for balance with his crutch. He looked down. The prosthesis lying beside him now seemed like a forgotten, useless object, and his leg, the one he was born with lifeless, was now there, firm, strong, alive. He trembled. He touched his own thigh, then his knee, then his feet. He took a step, then another, and another. No pain, no effort. Just a convulsive cry that filled his chest with such force that he fell to his knees, not out of weakness, but out of reverence. "Lord, why now?" he whispered through sobs. But deep in his spirit, the answer had already been whispered, "Because you never stopped believing, even when no one else saw." The day dawned with a clear sky, almost unrecognizable to someone who had lived through so many gray dawns. Joshua walked to the town square. Each step was a miracle relived. He sat on the bench in front of the bandstand, where as a child he used to watch couples dance from afar. There, with the sun warming his face, he understood. The miracle wasn't just the healing, it was the waiting. It was the gratitude planted in dry soil. It was faith lived when everything felt silent. And now, with his soul rejoicing, he didn't want to keep that for himself. In the months that followed, Joshua began visiting hospitals, nursing homes, schools. He didn't give speeches. He told his story the way one shares bread. He founded a small association to support people with disabilities and soon received support from the community. But more than aid, he received testimonies. "Hearing you made me want to live again. You taught me how to wait." Joshua smiled with humility. He knew it wasn't him. It was the grace that had sustained him when no one else believed. Joshua's name began to circulate through town, then neighboring cities, and soon reached local newspapers that called him the man of the miracle. But he always turned down the title with a serene smile. "The miracle isn't mine," he would say. "It belongs to all who keep waiting even when the sky is silent." He didn't want fame or applause. His joy was sitting with those who suffered and saying, "I understand, I've been there." And when he said it, his eyes carried a truth that needed no explanation. During one of his visits to a children's hospital, a 7-year-old girl with no arms asked him, "Do you think God loves me, even like this?" Joshua knelt before her, touched her forehead gently, and replied with tears in his eyes, "God loves you like no one ever could. You don't need to do anything to earn it. Just existing is enough." In that moment, he understood that his mission wasn't to talk about miracles. It was to be a bridge between pain and hope. And there, before a child full of questions, he felt his life had found its purpose. Over time, Joshua returned to writing as he had before, but now no longer in secret. His prayers became public letters, which he posted on church bulletin boards and handed out at association gatherings. He wrote about faith, silence, waiting, and gratitude. But above all, he wrote about a God who is never absent, even when he seems quiet, a God who doesn't need to prove anything to be present. One day, someone asked if he would have preferred to receive the miracle earlier as a child and avoid so many years of pain. He thought for a long while before answering, "If I had been healed earlier, maybe I wouldn't have learned how to see with my heart. Maybe I wouldn't have discovered that faith doesn't exist to remove pain, but to walk with it until it transforms." It was the most honest answer he could give. Because Joshua wasn't made of euphoria, he was made of roots, the kind that grow slowly in the dark, but support trees that touch the sky. Years passed, and Joshua aged with the same gentle gaze he had as a boy, a gaze that didn't seek anything, but simply saw. He continued living simply in the same little room beside the workshop, now renovated with the help of friends who had become family over time. On Sundays, he would walk to the hill behind the town and sit under an old tree, where the wind seemed to whisper truths only the soul understands. There, alone but whole, he gave thanks for the pain that had taught him to love, for the silences that had taught him to listen, for the days when life had no meaning, but he chose to continue. "That's what faith is," he would whisper, "a light that doesn't go out even when no one sees it." Sometimes, children from the orphanage would come visit him. He listened to them the way one listens to heaven, with reverence. And he always repeated, "You are seen, you are loved. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." To each one, he gave a small, handwritten note, like seeds cast into good soil. He knew that one day they would grow. And so, Joshua lived, not as a hero, not as a saint, but as someone who chose to give thanks even when there was nothing to celebrate. His body, once limited, was healed, but his soul had been healed long before. The true miracle wasn't his regenerated leg, it was the faith that didn't decay over time. Joshua's story didn't end the day he walked again. On the contrary, that was only the beginning. Because some lives bloom on stage, and others bloom in the hard ground of reality. And Joshua was one of those. A common man, flesh and bone, but with a spirit rooted in the invisible. His journey left an invisible trail of comfort, of faith, of hope. And to this day, whoever walks where he once walked feels something different in the air, as if God had stepped there, in silence, beside someone who never stopped believing. If this story touched your heart in any way, share in the comments. When was the moment in your life that you chose to keep believing, even when everything seemed to be against you? Your experience could bring comfort and inspire others who are going through silent battles. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and send it to someone who needs to hear this message today. Shared faith multiplies.